Alright guys, welcome to my ultimate guide on how to play as the Trapper, and more specifically in today's video I am going to give you a general overview of who the Trapper is, how you would play as the Trapper. We'll also take a look at his perks, the best perks to run with the Trapper, as well as an in-depth look at his add-ons, the best add-ons to run when you're playing as the Trapper. Now, as you can tell, I love playing as the Trapper. My Trapper is a Prestige 3. I love playing as him. He's my favorite killer in the entire game, so I'm really excited to share my knowledge about the Trapper with you. So if you've ever wanted to learn about the Trapper, how to play as him, the best perks, the best add-ons, this is the ultimate guide for you. So without much further ado, let's jump right into it. Alright, so first things first, who is the Trapper and how would you play as the Trapper? The Trapper is primarily a defensive killer, which means that once the game starts, unlike other killers who begin the hunt immediately, the Trapper will spend the first 30 seconds to, let's say, 2 minutes laying traps in very specific spots in the map. So he's more laid back, he's more of a mid-game to an end-game kind of killer. He's not like the hillbilly or the nurse or the wraith or the doctor who start the hunt immediately. He's kind of like the hag in that they both spend the first few moments laying traps in specific spots and then they begin the hunt. So that's how you would play as the Trapper. You don't start hunting immediately, you spend some time to lay traps and then you begin the hunt. So playing as the Trapper has two major advantages, but it also has one major disadvantage. And let's talk about the disadvantage first of all. The major disadvantage of using the Trapper is that his ability to lay traps cannot be used as a substitute for any killer perks. And speaking of perks, let's take a quick look at the perks I have with the Trapper. Alright, so in here you can see all the perks I have, and there are many of them. His ability to lay traps cannot replace the purpose or the use of any one of these perks. Other killers have that advantage over the Trapper. If you're playing as the hillbilly or Leatherface, for example, the fact that they wield chainsaws allows them to break through pallets very quickly, which means that you don't have to run brutal strength when you're playing with these killers. You also don't need to run nowhere most of the time, because if they hit you with the chainsaw, you're going down. If you're playing as the Wraith or you're playing as the Doctor, you don't need to run tracking perks like Whispers or Spies from the Shadow, because they are naturally really good at tracking. If you're playing as the Nurse, you don't need to use brutal strength either, because she can blink through pallets and so on and so forth. The list goes on. So with the Trapper, yes, he lays traps, but all it does is it traps a survivor and that's it. You still need just about all these perks. All these perks can be used with the Trapper. They serve a particular purpose with the Trapper. So that's the major disadvantage of using the Trapper. None of his ability cannot replace any one of these perks. Alright, now there are two major advantages of using the Trapper. One advantage is the fact that he is arguably the best killer to prevent looping. And by looping, I'm referring to the scenario where you're chasing a survivor and they begin running around pallets, just running around, or they run in circles around a building and they constantly vault through one particular window over and over again. If you play smart as the Trapper, you would know this and you can lay a trap outside one of these windows. So when they vault through the window, boom, they get trapped and the loop is over. So the Trapper is fantastic when it comes to that. The second major advantage of using the Trapper is that he is the only killer who, while chasing one survivor in one end of the map, can inflict damage on another survivor who may be at the other far end of the map. Only the Trapper can do that. Leatherface can hit multiple survivors at the same time, but they have to be really close to themselves. The Trapper, it doesn't matter where they are. You can be at one end of the map, another survivor can be at another end of the map, and he will inflict damage on both of you at the same time. And that has happened to me several times before when playing as the Trapper, and trust me, it is one of the best feelings when playing killer in this game. You're chasing one survivor and you get the notification that another survivor has been trapped. Fantastic feeling. Now, when it comes to the skill, the kind of skill required to play as the Trapper, it is not technique based. If you're playing as the Huntress, you're playing as the Nurse, you're playing as the Chainsaw Brothers, that requires technique. You need to learn the technique of blinking when playing as the Nurse. You need to learn how to throw the hatchets when you're playing as the Huntress. You need to learn how to wield the chainsaws properly when you're playing as the Hillbilly or Leatherface. With the Trapper, there is no technique involved in laying traps. You simply use the button for laying traps, which is L2 on my PlayStation, and you're done. You've laid the trap. The skill required to play as the Trapper involves strategy, which means that you need to be able to anticipate and predict how survivors will behave during a match. Which means that when you're laying traps in very specific spots, which means that you need to be able to, again, strategize, think ahead, plan. You need to be able to read the game and predict where survivors will move. That is the kind of skill required to play as the Trapper. It's all about strategy. And I believe that if you're the kind of person who enjoys playing chess, you will probably love playing as the Trapper. I love playing chess, so maybe that's one of the reasons why I love playing as the Trapper. I love to predict. I love to anticipate the movement of my opponent. So I'll lay the trap and wait for them to get trapped, and then I will hook them. That's basically the skill required to play as the Trapper. It's more of strategy. It's not really much about technique. Alright? So we've covered the Trapper, his advantages, his disadvantage, and also a general overview. Let's now take a look at the best perks to run with the Trapper. Okay, so now let's talk about the best perks to run when playing as the Trapper, and my number one choice here would be Whispers. Especially Whispers on tier 3. Not Whispers tier 1, not Whispers tier 2, Whispers tier 3. Very, very important. Whispers lets you know when you're standing within 32 meters of a survivor. Now this is very important with the Trapper because when you're laying a trap, it is based on the element of surprise. You don't want to lay traps when survivors can simply see where you are laying the trap, and then they can either decide to go ahead and disable the trap, or if they're playing with friends, the survivor who sees you can simply tell his friends that, hey, don't go there, there's a trap right there. And for you, the game's up. You've not only wasted your time setting up that trap, but you've also wasted that trap because it's not doing anything at that point, it's just right there. So with Whispers, Whispers will let you know when there is a possibility that a survivor can actually see what you're doing. Okay? So you can either go ahead and decide to lay the trap in the hope that the survivor will not have seen you, or you can decide to walk to another location of the map where Whispers isn't active, and then you can lay your traps right there. Remember that when playing as the Trapper, you need the element of surprise. You don't want to have survivors seeing where you're laying your traps. It's not gonna work out well for you. So Whispers, very, very, very useful. Whispers is also great during the end of the game when the hatch has been opened. You found the hatch, but you can't see the last survivor. Whispers will let you know if the survivor is anywhere near the hatch, or if they're far away, and then you can begin the hunt and try to track them down before they find the hatch. Whispers is fantastic in that kind of scenario. Also, another scenario where Whispers can be very useful is at the end of the game when you've killed 3 survivors, or let's say 2 survivors have escaped, or let's just say there's just 1 survivor left. However, the survivor is in a dying state. You can use Whispers to track them where they are. Deerstalker obviously is the best perk for tracking survivors who are in a dying state, but if you don't have Deerstalker, Whispers is a decent alternative to Deerstalker in such a scenario. So Whispers for me, my number one choice perk when playing as the Trapper. Very, 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 very important. Now the second, third, and fourth perks will depend on the add-ons I'm going to use, as well as the offerings that I would use. But in most cases, the second perk I would run would be Iron Grasp. Now, Iron Grasp and Agitation serve more or less the same function, which is to secure a hook. Now, Agitation is actually one of the 3 perks that comes with the Trapper, and if I was going to be sentimental, I would say that Agitation is a better perk than Iron Grasp, but in all honesty, Iron Grasp, in my humble opinion, is a superior perk to Agitation. So I would run Iron Grasp to secure those hooks. However, if I was going to make an offering for the Putrid Oak, which calls on the entity to create 3 more sacrificial hooks, I would not run Iron Grasp, because having 3 additional hooks on the map goes a long way to compensating for the lack of Agitation or Iron Grasp. So again, if I was going to run Putrid Oak, I would not run Iron Grasp. But in a situation where I am not running Putrid Oak, Iron Grasp for me is the second automatic choice. I would always run Iron Grasp. Now, the third choice here usually would be Nowhead. Nowhead for me is a very, very powerful perk, and it's also great for the end game. Remember that the Trapper is a mid-game to an end game kind of killer. So the kinds of perks that do very well with the Trapper would be perks that become active at the end of the game. So Nowhead is a fantastic choice, and it always catches survivors by surprise when, especially survivors who try body block, and maybe you're chasing one survivor who's heading to the gate, and then the other survivors who are at the gate try to body block and say, yeah, you know, I'm gonna take the hit for you. You smack them, boom, they go straight to the ground, and they begin regretting why they ever thought of body blocking you in the first place. So Nowhead would be a fantastic third choice perk to run with. Very, very useful, very, very important, highly recommended. Nowhead 3, not Nowhead 1, not Nowhead 2, Nowhead 3. All right. Now the fourth perk right here, again, will depend on the add-ons and offerings that I would make, but usually my fourth choice here would be Nurse's Calling. Nurse's Calling is great. It lets you know when survivors are healing within a 28-meter range of where you are. Again, note that all these perks usually are at level 3, at tier 3. Iron Grasp on tier 1 or tier 2 is still decent. It goes a long way to helping you. But Whispers that is on tier 1 or tier 2 is kind of useless. Nowhead that's on tier 1, tier 2 is useless. Nurse's Calling on tier 1 and tier 2, not the best. Make sure these perks are at tier 3. Alright, so again, Nurse's Calling at tier 3 will let you know when survivors are healing within 28 meters of where you are. And one thing about survivors is they tend to want to heal themselves as quickly as possible, because when they are injured, they are vulnerable. So many of them always fall for this trap. You know, you have Nurse's Calling, you swing at them, and they run, they hide, you're looking for them, you can't see them. When they know that you're looking for them, they can begin to try to heal themselves quickly. Nurse's Calling will let you know where they're healing. You go ahead, you hit them the second time, and they are done for. So Nurse's Calling is a great perk to run with the Trapper. Now, other perks you can run would include Brutal Strength. Brutal Strength is great for breaking pallets, and if you're the kind of Trapper who prefers to break through pallets, you don't want to go around the whole looping thing. You can break pallets, chase the survivors, and then hit them. Brutal Strength would be a great perk for that one. Franklin's Demise is a great perk, but it's very, very situational. The one major time I would use Franklin's Demise is when you've seen the 4 survivors you're going up against, and let's say 3 of them have medkits. I would typically run Franklin's Demise in such a scenario, because usually survivors who don't have self-care will tend to carry medkits with them into a match, especially if it's a public match, it's not Survive with Friends. The medkit obviously to use to heal themselves when they get injured. So when you see survivors, 2 or 3 of them, or even all 4 of them carrying medkits, that is usually a good indication that they don't have self-care. So you want to run Franklin's Demise, but also what you can do is for the offering, you can also run an offering of the cut coin, which would call on the entity to prevent the appearance of 2 chests, making it even more difficult for them to find medkits in chests and heal themselves should in case they lose the medkits when you hit them using Franklin's Demise. So using Franklin's Demise again requires strategy. You need to be smart. Notice if the survivors are carrying medkits. If they're not carrying medkits, if they're carrying flashlights, toolboxes, then Franklin's Demise will not be a great choice in my humble opinion. If it's toolboxes you see them carrying, what you might want to do is to run Hex Ruin. Hex Ruin is a great perk, and it's cancer against toolboxes that have brand new parts, because many survivors, many times when the game starts, what they want to do is to find a generator and install the brand new part as quickly as possible. They don't take the time to figure out whether or not that's actually Hex Ruin, and it's always a really bad day for them when they run the brand new part and discover that, oh, Hex Ruin is active and there goes the brand new part. So if you notice that survivors, many of them are carrying toolboxes, Hex Ruin could be a good perk to run with. Now, when it comes to the add-ons, there are specific add-ons that can inflict the dying state on a survivor who gets trapped. That add-on would be the Diamond Stone or the Honing Stone. We'll talk about them in just a moment, but these two add-ons can inflict severe damage on a survivor, put them into dying states once they are free from the trap. So if I was going to run any one of these two add-ons, I would definitely run Dear Stalker. Dear Stalker would be one of the perks I would run, because with Dear Stalker lets you know when you're standing within a certain range of a survivor in the dying state. My Dear Stalker is only on, oh, it's actually on a level 3, I'm sorry. So level 3 Dear Stalker will reveal when a dying survivor is within 36 meters of where you are. So if I was going to run the Honing Stone or the Diamond Stone, I would run Dear Stalker, another great perk to run with the Trapper. So those are basically the major perks I typically run when playing with the Trapper. Whispers, Nurse's Calling, Brutal Strength, Hex Ruin, Noed, Dear Stalker. Also, Franklin's Demise, like I said, sometimes Franklin's Demise is great. You can also run Agitation. If you don't have Brutal Iron Grasp, you can run Agitation. Agitation is a great alternative to Iron Grasp. Now, the perks that are not really that great with the Trapper, Monitor and Abuse is not, it's not the best perk to run when playing with the Trapper. It's useful, but not, there are better perks you can run. Same goes with Lightborn. Now, if you are playing as the Wraith, Lightborn will obviously be one of the better perks to run with, but you're playing as the Trapper, you're not exactly vulnerable to flashlights as such. So Lightborn will not be a great perk to run with the Trapper. Same goes with the perks that have hexes. Devour of Hope, Hunter's Lullaby. They're not the best perks to run with the Trapper, because you really cannot defend those hexes, those hex totems, unlike the Hillbilly or the Nurse that can travel really, really fast. If you're gonna play as the Trapper, you typically don't want to use such perks, because you could be at one end of the map and one of the other survivors finds your hex totem, and before you can get there, it's already gone. Unless, of course, you place traps in very specific spots, but protecting a hex totem would require usually about 2 to 3 traps, and I'm not sure if you have the luxury of using 3 traps just to protect one single totem. So other perks that are not really great with the Trapper, Tinkerer. Tinkerer is kind of wasted when you're playing as the Trapper. You don't really want to use that. Obsession perks, save the best for last. Perks like Dying Light, again, they're not the best perks to run when playing as the Trapper, and so is Spies from the Shadow. Spies from the Shadow, not really all that great when playing with the Trapper. So that's basically it for the perks. If you have any questions about this, of course, do let me know. Put them in the comment section below. If you have your own ideas on perks to run with the Trapper, again, also let me know. I really would love to hear what you guys have to say. I'm always looking to learn from other people, so if you have any disagreements with what I've said, maybe you feel certain perks are good with the Trapper, do let me know, okay? So that's it for the perks. Let's now move on to the add-ons that you want to run when playing as the Trapper. Okay, so now let's talk about the add-ons that you want to run whenever you're playing as the Trapper. And the first category of add-ons involves inflicting damage to a trapped survivor, and there are 2 of them. The first one would be the Diamond Stone, the second is the Honing Stone. The Diamond Stone would always inflict the dying state onto a trapped survivor, while the Honing Stone has a 50% chance of inflicting the dying state onto a trapped survivor. So These two are very powerful add-ons that you typically want to run whenever you're playing as the Trapper. The next category of add-ons would be the add-ons that allows you to carry multiple traps at a time, and there are two of them. The first one would be the Stitched Bag, which allows you to carry 3 traps at a time, but also provides you with 2 additional traps to the default trap that you start with. So when you start a game with the Stitched Bag, you actually have 3 traps. The default trap that you start off with, and then 2 extra traps. Plus, you can also carry 3 traps at a time. The second would be the Trapper Bag. Very useful. Gives you 1 additional trap, and you can carry 2 traps at a time. So that's the second category of add-ons that we have with the Trapper. The third add-on involves inflicting heavy bleeding onto a survivor. There are 2 of them. You have the Rusted Jaws, which is in green, and you have the Serrated Jaws. Now, this is a particular category of add-ons that I tend not to use all that much, because when you're trapping a survivor, your intention is not necessarily to inflict heavy bleeding. You either want to put them into a dying state, or you want to make it as difficult for them to get away from that trap, or to rescue themselves from that trap as quickly as possible. So inflicting heavy bleeding, yeah, it's great, but it's not really one of the better add-ons to use whenever you're playing as the Trapper. So I typically tend to stay away from using Rusted Jaws or the Serrated Jaws. The fourth category of add-ons would be the add-ons that allows you to lay traps very, very quickly. You have the Setting Tools, which is the fastest. This allows you to set your traps very, very, very quickly. You also have the Trap Setters, which moderately decreases the amount of time you're going to spend setting a trap. And the last one would be the Trapper Gloves. So these 3 fall into the category of allowing you to lay a trap as quickly as possible, and these are more of one of my favorite add-ons to use whenever I can. The fourth category of add-ons are the add-ons that makes it very difficult for survivors to sabotage your hooks. So you have the Fastening Tools. This makes it very, very difficult for survivors to sabotage your traps, but also the Bloody Coil. This makes it incredibly difficult for survivors to sabotage your traps. The problem with Bloody Coil, though, is that it takes a very long time to lay the trap. Oh my gosh, it takes maybe 4 to 5 seconds to lay a trap. It is an add-on I very rarely ever use, and also because most of the time, when you are in a match as a Trapper, survivors typically do not spend time trying to sabotage your traps. If they're going to sabotage, it will likely be your hooks and not your traps, unless of course if it's a Jake. If it's a Jake might likely want to sabotage your trap, but a lot more often than not, survivors either look to just disable the trap and not sabotage the trap. So using the Bloody Coil or the Fastening Tools is not an add-on I will typically use all that much. The next category of add-ons would be add-ons that makes it very difficult for survivors to break free from your trap. You have the 4-coil spring kit, and then you also have the with the 4-coil spring kit and also the strong coil spring. These two make it really difficult for survivors to break free from your trap. So again, this is one of my favorite add-ons to run with whenever I'm playing as a Trapper. Either you go with the 4-coil spring kit, or you go with the strong coil spring. Note though that if you use either one of these 2 add-ons, the amount of time it will take for you to set the trap will increase. So to balance this out, you can typically run with something like Setting Tools, and then you can run with the 4-coil spring kit. So this will increase the time. This will decrease the time it will take for you to set the trap. This will increase the time it will take for you to set the trap, but because there are 2 add-ons, they cancel the effect out. So the time it will take for you to set a trap would be normal, while it will also take longer for survivors to break free from your trap. whenever they get trapped in one of them. So this would typically be a very good combination of add-ons to run with. Now the final category of add-ons are the add-ons that make it really difficult for survivors to see your traps. You have the tar bottle, which darkens the trap, but you also have the logwood dye, which also darkens the trap. Not my favorite add-ons, to be honest, but they can be useful on a few occasions. So sometimes you might just want to play around with these add-ons and you can use them. Alright, you can use them and just see how it works for you. But usually this would be a very good combination. You have your setting tools, you also have your foil coil spring kit. Now, if you're playing, if you're making an offering for bloody party streamers, or you're going with the survivor pudding, basically you're trying to maximize your kills, maximize your points. The best combination, the most powerful combination would be to go with the diamond stone and your stitched bag. Okay, this is extremely powerful. This gives you 3 traps. This would inflict the dying state on a survivor as soon as they are trapped. So this, in my humble opinion, is the strongest possible combination of add-ons whenever you're playing as the trapper. Okay, but if you're playing a regular game, you don't have survivor pudding, you don't have bloody party streamers, I would typically recommend you go with setting tools, which allows you to set traps very quickly, and then you can also go with the foil coil spring kit or the regular strong coil spring, which will make it very difficult for survivors to break free from your trap. So that will buy you time to get to where they've been trapped, get them away from the trap, put them on hook, and go about your business. So that's basically the add-ons that you can use whenever you're playing as a trapper. Stay away from the bloody coil. It really takes way too long for you to set the trap. Rusted Jaws and Serrated Jaws, all they do is inflict heavy bleeding onto a survivor. Not the best add-ons. And finally, the add-ons like the fastening tools, which makes it very difficult for survivors to sabotage your traps. Again, survivors are not likely to want to sabotage your traps. They would likely just want to disable the trap and go about fixing journeys. So fastening tools and the Serrated Jaws, bloody coil springs, not the best add-ons to use when you're playing as the trapper. Alright, so before I go, I forgot to mention that another great perk you can run with the trapper would be Thanatophobia. This of course gives out penalties, time penalties to survivors who are trying to repair, who are trying to heal, or trying to sabotage, and all this will depend on how many of the survivors are injured, hooked, or are in a dying state at the time. So Thanatophobia is another great perk to run when you're playing as the trapper. I apologize, I forgot to mention about Thanatophobia. It's a great perk to run, and it's also one of the perks I run once in a while whenever I play as the trapper. So that's basically my guide on the trapper, who he is, how to play as the trapper, his perks, his add-ons, and also the kinds of offerings you can make whenever you're playing as the trapper. So this is the first part in a 3-part series. The next video I'm going to make regarding the trapper would be a video showing you the best places to place traps in all the maps. I'm actually making the video right now, so it'll be out very soon. I'm actually waiting to get the new DLC involving Freddy Krueger, because there's going to be a new map, so I'm just waiting to get that new map, explore it, figure out the best place to place traps there, and then I will release the video. The final video would be a montage of me playing live as the trapper, so I'm going to actually give you commentary while I'm playing as a trapper, so you can see how I play as a trapper, how I think, where I place my traps, and so on and so forth. So that's it. Thank you so much for watching this guide. If you have any questions about the trapper, do let me know. I love playing as the trapper. If you have any comments, if you have any sort of disputes, if you feel maybe I said something wrong, or if you want to challenge my opinion about certain things, feel free to jump into the comment section below. Let me know what your thoughts are, especially regarding the perks that you would run whenever you're playing as the trapper. I really want to hear what you guys have to say about that. So thank you very much. If you loved the video, give it a thumbs up, share the video with people who you think would want to play as a trapper. Thank you so much, and until next time, bye bye.